At the end of Nolan's Odyssey, Penelope turns to Odysseus and she says to him, "Why will the stories only be sung?" And Odysseus replies, "Because songs will be all they have to remember those of us who could write." Which I thought was an interesting line to have at the end of a film, kind of talking about the permanence of song and lyrics. Especially felt a little odd because this last week, the Irish songwriter Glen Hansard, I think I'm saying that right, passed away in an accident. There's one clip that came up on my social media. It's a clip from a David Letterman interview where Glen Hansard is talking about songs and their permanence. And I was going to try and summarize it, but I think I'm just going to play the clip for you because he says it much more eloquently than I can.
There's a Moya Canon poem that probably speaks a lot to the idea of taking songs and what happens to songs and where they go and where music goes. It's called Carrying the Songs. It was always those with little else to carry who carried the songs. Deep rhythms.
Every one of the poems I write ends in off.
Okay, I think I have it. Okay, all right, one more time. It was always those with little else to carry who carried the songs. To Babylon, to the Mississippi. The last of these possessed less than nothing, did not own their own bodies. Yet 3 centuries later, deep rhythms from Africa stowed in their hearts and their bones, they carry the world's songs. And for those who left my county, girls from the Downings and the Rosses, who followed the herring boats north, gutting the sea's silver as they went, or boys from Ranafast who slept over a rope in a bothy. Songs were their soul's currency, the pure metal of their hearts, to be exchanged for other gold, other songs that rang true and bright when flung down on the deal boards of their days. So this idea that songs are what we carry, even when we have nothing else. Those who are the victors write the history. Those who suffered wrote the songs.
History is written by the victors, but those who suffered wrote the songs, which is an incredible line. Especially because I was just watching the Odyssey, really got me thinking about the permanence of songs, especially as compared to sometimes the impermanence of film. I mean, everybody knows that Nolan likes to play with time in his movies, but beyond just playing with structure or memory, I really appreciate when Nolan is looking at legacy and how his films will be received in the future. There's a line in Tenet where they say, "We're always sending things into the future. The question is, can the future speak back?" And then in Interstellar, oh my goodness, that whole movie is about legacy.
Once you're a parent, you're the ghost of your children's future.
How even that film itself is going to be preserved in the future. At the end of Interstellar, there's literally the last generation, that older generation, is preserved through video on, almost like a Kubrick monolith in that museum. And so he's looking at how does video preserve memory and how do his movies actually maybe be preserved into the future. And so I thought it was really odd that in the Odyssey, in the end, when it's talking kind of about legacy, it says that songs are going to be remembered as opposed to film. We're watching a film, but it's talking about songs. And obviously I know it's referring to the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. That's what we have from that time period. But it kind of felt like a tip of the hat towards the form of songwriting and poetry, that it is inherently a more long-lasting medium of art as opposed to film. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, the difference between, songs and poetry and writing and film, because songs can be transmitted from human to human. As soon as you know a song, you can give it to somebody else. You become a conduit to share that song. All you need to do is know the words and, the melody, and you can sing it for another person. It's very hard to crack down, and stop people from singing songs, especially in private. Songs can still be passed down. They can be replicated, and anybody can write them. They're very cheap. All it requires is a pen and a knowledge of a language to write your own songs. And it's the oldest, art form, I would say. It is, as long as we have had language, we have had songs and poetry. We've been using the sounds from our mouths to create art. Whereas film is maybe I think it is the most modern art form. It is uniquely modern in its form. We've only had film for like 130 years, so it's not been on the scene very long. It's still in its infantile stage of being developed. Like, what is filmmaking? It is distinctly technological. There's a reason it didn't come on the scene, because you need a camera. You need something to record. So you need access to a certain kind of technology to both record it, to reproduce it, to project it and share it. You need technology. You don't. If we lost It's a Wonderful Life, I could give you lines that I remember, but that's not the same thing as giving you the movie. In the same way that, like, I could sing for you, I don't know, Jesus Loves Me, and that is, I am giving you the song. I was watching Silo recently, and I was struck by this, where the people in the silo, which it's a TV show where it's like post apocalyptic civilization, they don't have access to video recordings, and so they don't know any films. And yet the main character's name is Juliet, and she constantly meets people who say, "Oh, Juliet, like the play," which I find so interesting, that Shakespeare's work is continuing on in this post-apocalyptic world, even after civilization has crumbled. People are still familiar with Romeo and Juliet, but they probably have never seen a movie before. And that's because I think poetry and writing and songs are transmitted, and they're very hard to squash, and they're easy to replicate, whereas film requires technology to create, reproduce, and distribute. That also means that I think songs have kind of the reputation, because they've been around for so long, of having prestige about them. Poetry and songwriting is seen as very classical, very elitist, whereas filmmaking, because it requires so much financial investment to make, it is, I think, uniquely susceptible to become very commercial, and also susceptible to the potential to become propaganda. Because those who have money and those who have power are the ones that have access to making the films, reproducing them, and distributing them, whereas songs can be written by anybody and shared with anybody. And so I think filmmaking still is seen as kind of a lower art form than poetry. It hasn't really found its legs yet. It's very much seen as, the attitude towards filmmaking is that it's kind of for the masses, it's commercial, it's like a carnival, but it's not actually substantive. And you see this in this week's comments from Emily Wilson, the translator of the Odyssey, which is the translation that Christopher Nolan used for his film, who came out with her own review that was, I would say, that was uncharitable and unfavorable to Nolan's film. And I think part of this stigma is motivating her review, that classical literature is seen as high art, whereas filmmaking is seen as kind of for the masses, popular, commercial, and kind of just spectacle. She kind of says as much in her review, and she says, my teenagers had a good time. Or she describes the film as an elaborate 4th of July fireworks display with about the same level of narrative and emotional depth. And it just feels like her review, to me, has a disregard for film as an art form, and just lacks curiosity in general of maybe what is Nolan doing with this film. But yeah, Emily Wilson's review, I felt, was a perfect embodiment of this attitude towards song and verse as opposed to film. One is kind of like true art and is going to last for a long time, and the other one is commercial for the masses, and just kind of spectacle over substance. And so, yeah, I do wonder where film, and specifically this film, is going to sit in 100 years, in 500 years, in 1,000 years. Will they be watching Nolan's Odyssey in 70 millimeter IMAX in 1,000 years? Because it's so closely tied to the technology that creates it, reproduces it, and projects it, that it's also pretty tied to our time period. And I don't know if Nolan's Odyssey is still going to be able to be watched in 1,000 years. But I don't know if that means that it's any less of an art, or that it's not as respectable or deep or thoughtful. While I want to recognize that film, because of what makes it film, makes it very hard to aspire beyond just commercialism, beyond propaganda, and actually create true art. I don't think that that means that all film is that way. And I don't think that just because it's a newer art form that it deserves the disrespect that it sometimes gets, or the attitude that it's just spectacle and entertainment. So yeah, my guess is Homer's Odyssey is going to be read in 1,000 years, but Nolan's Odyssey will kind of be a forgotten treasure. But I don't think that that means that it is any less of a treasure. Thanks for watching.